Tonight on the Star Trek Universe podcast, we are talking about our favorite series of Trek. Our favorite live-action Star Trek series ranked from first to last. We'll come up together. We are going to work through a ranking and figure out together how we rank the series. It should be an interesting time.
Yay!
All that right after this. Welcome to the Star Trek Universe podcast. My name is Matthew Carroll.
I'm David C. Robertson.
David C. Robertson. Robertson? I just said your name wrong.
You always do.
I do not. I say Robertson. I do not. That is just a bald-faced lie. It's a bald-faced lie. I noticed it because I don't normally do it, and I just fumbled over the R.
Every time.
Every time. David C. Robertson. Every time. Since we were 6 years old, I've been calling you Robinson. Good old Robinson. Fuck you. Okay, so we are going to talk about our favorite Star Trek series ranked. This is still a get to know you episode. This is our two-part series of getting to know Matt and Dave. Wink.
Yeah, we are courting you, but we're not going to woo you.
That's right. That's right. You either dig our kind of Star Trek liking or you don't. You know, I'd get it if you're like, yeah, these guys aren't the kind of fans I am, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's definitely ones where I'm like, those guys are way too up their own asses, or those guys aren't up their asses nearly enough for me. There's really a fine line.
Why is it all about asses with you, man?
I don't know, man. Since I was 6. Okay.
Luckily, we met when we were 5.
Yeah, that small window of time where you got to know me before my ass obsession.
Before your ass phase.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Let's get less Freudian. Okay. So we're going to talk about our top series, and I say we start from the number 1 on the list and go to number 6 on the list, because my logic is it's just more fun to hear people celebrate stuff than bash it. And I have a feeling the first one we're going to celebrate highly, and the last one we are going to probably bash heavily. So, and it may be different. I don't know your list yet.
That's right. We
came up with our list separately, which I kind of like. So we're going to start at number 1, which I have a feeling we might be on the same page about, but I don't know. I could see my 1 and 2 swapping on your 1 and 2, but I don't know. We've talked about this stuff many times, but never on a microphone until these casts. So, let's go with number 1. You want to throw your number 1 out?
It's tough, man, because...
Oh, yeah, I bet it is. I can totally see this being a hard one for you.
I am really, it is almost like it's almost like a dead tie for me, and it was really hard for me to come up with the number 1. I feel like there are 2 answers for it, because, in a storytelling sense and a narrative sense, 1 is my favorite, and then there's the other one that's just paradigm setter. So,
right.
But this one, Deep Space Nine, edges out the original series for me.
Ding, 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 and we have a match. Me as well. Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek, and here's my logic. I'm with you. Original series, it is right there under it, but Deep Space Nine to me perfected the form. Still has great moral questions. It still has great standalone episodes, but it infused a newer sense of storytelling. The serialized format really fit well with those characters, and honestly, just staying in place. And I know Star Trek, a lot of people don't like Deep Space Nine because of this, because it's so stationary. What I love about that is it causes... There are very few antagonists on Star Trek that return. The Borg, races return, Q returns, of course. And every once in a while you get an antagonist that shows up here and there. But for the most part, lore. But for the most part, antagonists in Star Trek are one-shot deals.
Yeah.
And as we talked about in our last episode, how I just dislike straw men altogether.
You're right.
Characters like Gul Dukat are so interesting.
Yeah, and for me, like on DS9, like some of the antagonists are just they live on the station.
Yes,
and they're antagonists until at some point you look up and you go, oh shit, they've done an entire episode about Garrick.
Yeah. Garrick is one of my favorite characters.
And he's the protagonist now.
Yes, and understanding where the Cardassians are coming from and the Bajorans, like it's almost like DS9 takes what could have been an episode of Star Trek, like the next, and I think it is. I think the Next Generation, don't they go to Bajor, or don't they talk about Bajor and how it's being enslaved by the Cardassians?
They absolutely do. In fact, Ro Laren, Michelle Forbes, was supposed to be in place of Kira Nerys on DS9. They were setting up her character, and then like Michelle Forbes like bolted.
Okay.
So
and the whole Maquis thing comes from all those the TNG stuff that spins off into Voyager, but Deep Space Nine does just an amazing job of taking what could have been an episode of Star Trek. The really central stuff of DS9 is the Bajorans, the Cardassians, and the wormhole aliens, and how the Federation sort of navigates that entire situation. And I could totally see an episode of the original series or TNG where they just come to a planet and they do a short version of that, like a 45-minute version of that story. But instead, we got to see a 7-season version where you actually get to understand Gul Dukat and what drives him to utter madness, and like his daughter and he truly believed himself the benevolent dictator on DS9. Like it's such a great exploration of building an antagonist that it blows me away, completely blows me away, and the Bajoran people, how complicated it can be to be a downtrodden people, the line between resistance and terrorism, and the blurry line between resistance and terrorism that our characters have to navigate. It's just it tackles so many interesting topics in such a cool way, with characters that come back and return, and each time they get thicker and more interesting. And as much as I love the original series, because it's the paradigm definer, DS9 just does it on a level. In many ways, it just is a big story. Is the same classic kind of story told, blown out to the degree that you can really analyze every piece of it as it moves. Mm-hmm. I love it.
Absolutely, and one of the things I really loved about DS9 was how they tackled religion. Like I loved that. Like for Starfleet, the prophets were just wormhole aliens, but the Bajorans saw them as gods who were protecting them, and it was both.
Right, and that's where it really comes down to, as the viewer. Someone has to say it at some point in the show, probably, but it's like, what's the difference? Yeah. Like I want to say like they definitely have that discussion the first time he encounters them, which I guess the first episode they're like, if these are, or the first time they realize they live outside of time, is what I'm thinking. The first time they realize that they live outside of time, and the reason they're the prophets is because they literally have seen the future and the past, and they can talk to you throughout it, and it's just amazing.
But
what's the difference between a god and a wormhole alien with that much power?
And spoilers if you haven't watched it. I know a lot of Star Trek fans haven't watched all of DS9 because they just, for whatever reason, and I hate that argument too that so many people use, and that you brought it up before, the argument that Star Trek's about exploring and they didn't go anywhere, they were stationary. That's bullshit. They went to the Gamma Quadrant. They had the freaking Defiant. They, instead of in a lot of ways, instead of exploring outwardly, they explored inwardly. Like that, we had so many. They explored those characters so much and so well that they actually just expanded out to the recurring characters as well. Like I knew Rom better than I knew Riker. I
think you're right about that. And I would be remiss to not mention, not only do they expand on them and dive into those characters, which is very much like the exploration that happens on DS9. You're right. They have the Defiant, they have the Gamma Quadrant, they have the Wormhole, they have all those things, but it's also a deep exploration within.
Yeah.
Of within all those characters. They really dive into all those characters and different races and cultures and really do deep dives on a lot of things that other Star Trek just glosses over and speeds
Absolutely.
by. Because you're going so fast, you're going at warp speed, you miss the things that are passing you by. You miss the depth of the cultures, and you don't get that on Star Trek DS9. You really get depth.
I feel like we're about to get into that old episode of the Andy Griffith Show. The guy like comes through, and he's like comes through on the weekend. His car breaks down. He's like, I got to get to New York or whatever it was, and then like he winds up going to church. He hasn't been to church in a long time or whatever, and the pastor's like, slow down. What's the hurry?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was waiting. I was hearing out the metaphor.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was just the comment that you mean.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. For me, Deep Space Nine is just the best fusion of like modern storytelling, a real respect for the universe, with all the stuff with the Klingons.
They referenced the original series more than TNG ever did.
Yeah,
Despite having actual cast members from TNG from the original series.
yeah, and then it's still great standalone moral stories. Many episodes are still great standalone moral stories. They still you still get that episodic Trek if you're hungry for that. If you're thirsty for that episodic Trek, then it's right there for you. But they also combine that with good overarching storytelling and just the Klingons, the appearance of that like trio. What is it? Kang, Kor, and Koloth.
Yeah, the three from the original series.
Yeah. Original series Klingons actually appearing as allies in DS9 is one of the most fun things.
And Friends of Dax.
Yeah, and Friends of Dax who fought beside them in the old days. That's so much fun. It's just so much
great.
fun. If you haven't seen all of Deep Space Nine, you should absolutely see Deep Space Nine.
But that was the thing that I was like about to spoil. The realization that the Prophets set into motion the very birth of Captain Sisko.
Oh yes. That's
It's fantastic.
yeah. They like yeah. I'd forgotten that. So that's crazy. Yeah, that's really good. And the Prophets are such an interesting thing. I love the balance. The balance that they strike on that show between religion and science is better than any other show.
I agree.
I was really excited when Ronald D. Moore moved over to Battlestar Galactica and it was tackling some of the same issues with the Cylons. And then in the last season, he just, at least to me, it felt like he went full on religion with it. And it really disappointed me. So I love the first 3 seasons of Battlestar, but then in season 4, they just really leaned into the religious side of the argument, and it made in a way that I was like, oh, this is the question is gone, and so I lose interest. It's almost like one of the things in our lives that we're trying to do is figure out the mysteries of the universe and God.
Or Lost.
What?
Or Lost.
The Mystery of the Universe or Lost. That's true. The television show Lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. It was a confusing time as well. But I lose interest in a show when it acts like it has the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Because even as sure as we can be about our religions, it still feels like there are questions to be answered. And anyone who acts like they have every answer, it doesn't interest me because it rings as false or rings as preachy, I guess.
Yeah.
So you want to move on to the next show? Our next in our series of our 6 favorite Star Trek series.
Absolutely, man.
Maybe we should just do a top 5. That seems to make sense because I have a feeling we're gonna have the same bottom. Okay. So we already pretty much revealed what our second in the series is.
Absolutely, the original series.
The original series. I bounced between this one and TNG actually as well. For me, that was the jockeying that I had to do. For me, Deep Space Nine was always going to be number one. But the original series had to go on top of TNG for me because it's the original. I mean, that's what it really came down to. Mm-hmm. And I think that in many ways it does a better job of exploring humanity in little 1 hour moral tales, you know?
Absolutely. It is very, like, people kind of forget that, like, there's a lot of, like, misconceptions and false memories, I feel like, about the original series. Certainly it got a little it got pretty wonky, especially closer to the end. But, when you go back and you look at the first episodes, there is a progression. If you actually look at them in production order, you will see a more militaristic Kirk. You'll see, Kirk lonely and sort of like very burdened with his command.
Yeah.
Feeling like he to have someone to love is to show weakness, to his crew. Really strange, kind of old-fashioned ideas, about command and leadership. But even from, McCoy's first episode, they are laying in that those two knew each other from, back in the day. Like, they actually do a fair amount of nice character building just in those first few episodes.
I just, you bring up McCoy, and I think I mentioned it in the last episode, but I really love, one of the major things I love about that show is the dynamic between McCoy, Spock, and Kirk. Just like the trio that leads them is to me one of the best things about that show, because it's, as I said on the last cast, it's the emotions leading McCoy, logic leading Spock, and Kirk having to decide between those two, and it's that internal struggle we all have to sort of deal with, personified and put on the screen, and it's a great allegory for like just human understanding and human, movement through what they're trying to movement through this world of making real decisions.
Right.
I just love that.
And I love that there is actually, like, there is an arc to their friendship. Like, if you go back and you look at Where No Man Has Gone Before, McCoy's not even there. Spock and Kirk are very much at odds about what to do with Kirk's best friend, Gary Mitchell, who has become possessed by something in the barrier. They say that. It's lots of extended universe stuff has kind of played with what that might have been, whether it be a Q or Proteus from the X-Men universe or whatever.
that's all extended universe stuff. We'll skip that.
I direct you to Memory Beta Wikia for that. There's a very much, and it is missing in that second pilot Where No Man Has Gone Before, where you don't have the McCoy persona there. You just have Kirk, who's kind of doing the job of McCoy and himself, and it really does make Spock just look like an emotionless bastard.
Right.
Because Spock is just straight up like, you need to kill Gary Mitchell before he gets too powerful. And you're just like, damn, Spock, really?
It puts Kirk on the side of always having to be the emotional one.
Yeah.
And having to acknowledge humanity instead of it. And Kirk being the decider allows McCoy to be a bit irrational, which is part of emotions. And that part of emotions is that sometimes they drive you to do the wrong thing. And so it's great to have those two pushing against each other. And some, I know we talked a lot about, this show has gotten more political talk in the last episode than maybe my Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast has ever done.
We don't ever talk about it on DC on screen.
But it's just it's such an essential part of all this stuff, and I don't really want to get too much into the politics of it, but like, oftentimes, the sort of the same sorts of problems you face in these shows are the sort of are at least what they should be. Please forgive me. Modern conservatism currently is in a weird place, but classic classic conservatism is about logic and building a system that functions best for everyone. Mm-hmm. And then classic liberalism is kind of about giving a hand up to those who need it. And so a lot of what you find in that show, Spock is sort of standing in for what a conservative view of what you should do is. And in many ways, McCoy is the bleeding heart of the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that sort of dynamic exists, and it's super interesting to explore, and could be an interesting thing now. But we're in such a divided political time. It's hard to even talk about that on this podcast. So I understand why people wouldn't want to talk about it on a multi-million dollar show they're making.
And you know, I hadn't really considered it before, but I think it's interesting that these are our top two when you look at the triumvirate of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, because I don't think any other show has that except for DS9. Because Kira Nerys is very much like the bleeding heart in a lot of ways, and then sometimes she's very much not. You know, they kind of switch it up. Odo is usually kind of the Spock character.
Right. Well, I think that they do something interesting with Deep Space Nine, where I don't know who the triumvirate is for DS9. It's like you said, they change it up, and that's the thing. Yeah. Is like you have a captain and you have a lot of people, and they all have their different perspectives, and they all have very nuanced, different opinions, and they're all based on their own personal experience and their own logic. And like, there's not just. I like the allegory of the original series because it's so simple. It's so logic, emotions, you decide. But in real life, it's not that simple, and I like how complex DS9 is, because you've got Dax, who is very driven by like understanding, and she has a long lifespan, and so she has this like sort of is a very, very emotional, but also very intelligent person. Whereas McCoy sort of seemed like I hate to say it. This is not supposed to seem negative, but it probably does. He sort of seems sort of Bumpkin-esque at times, like he doesn't understand he's in space almost. I
get something completely different from McCoy. I get that McCoy is very much a bumpkin in a lot of ways. Like, he's very intelligent, but he's also like terrified of technology. He doesn't like to use the transporter. He doesn't like. That is like one of the things that sold me on the 2009 Trek.
Urban is so good.
Urban's like, you know, death is space is death and disease, whatever it was.
It's so good. There's darkness and death and disease.
Yeah.
So good. I think that he is that sort of wild-eyed emotionalism, whereas she is a much more thoughtful sort of bleeding heart. I'm going to use the word bleeding heart because I don't like using liberal and conservative because it has different connotations these days.
But so does the term bleeding heart.
Right, but I'm not meaning it as like in a bad way. I mean it as she just cares about people. I'm not saying it derogatory. So you have this sort of intelligent bleeding heart, which is interesting, and then you've got Kira Nerys, who is also very fiery, and I mean she is his second in command. I would consider her sort of one of the triumvirate, but she's also all fire and emotion, but it's a very specifically related to her past as someone who has a very limited experience. So you have this.
There is lots of prejudice on DS9.
Oh, absolutely. There's tons of prejudice. And there's tons of prejudice, and there's tons of opportunities for people to overcome that prejudice. Oh, I love
We've always joked that, like, in the 24th century Star Trek universe, that, you know, everyone had to be, all of the Federation and Starfleet had to be very evolved, and there could be no inner conflict, and importantly, and specifically Bashir and O'Brien never got that memo.
Yes.
Because they are like the most homophobic, ridiculous individuals.
They are so homophobic, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful because it's played for laughs. Like, a character can be flawed on a show.
Yeah, they're not, it's not a standard to aspire to.
Right, they are not aspire. It drove me nuts. A couple years ago, when the new Netflix special came out for Dave Chappelle, I guess it was this year probably. Dave Chappelle came out with his new stand-up special, and he had a joke in there about how he was supposed to go to a Black Lives Matter meeting, but he got offered a chance to go to the Grammys, I think it was, and he was
or
like...
the Oscars or something.
The Oscars, yeah something like that.
Something.
And he was like, but I've never been to the Oscars. And he's like, they don't need me. They got Stevie Wonder performing, or something like that. And he decided to go to the Oscars instead of going to a Black Lives Matter rally. And so many people got mad at him for that. But you're taking away the context of it being a comedy, and that Dave Chappelle is not the hero of the story there. Like, the joke is, look what a shithead I am. And we all have shithead tendencies. And if you don't acknowledge that humans have shithead tendencies, you're not acknowledging humanity. And people aren't perfect, and Star Trek shouldn't treat them like they are.
Right.
You can have systems in place to make a great society, but you still have to figure out a way to deal with humans within that. And I love the challenge of that. I love Star Trek so much. Are we talking about the original series right now?
We went back to DS9, but
I feel like that's going to happen.
Like, yeah, there are certain things in between. Like, yeah, it's got to go back and forth.
Odo is definitely the logic source. If we're getting back to Triumvirate, that's where we made the jump. Odo is definitely one of the logical sources. So is Worf. In many ways, Worf is fiery, but he's fiery from. See, he's logic, but he's all security logic. They just all have backstories and histories that make them who they are. I love this show.
Yeah, but so the original series is dated.
It is dated. I am a guy who my tastes change over time, and I am a victim of the internet. I find it hard to watch a video if it's more than 30 seconds long. I find it hard to settle in and watch a show if I'm not also playing a game on my phone, which I hate about myself. I'm a classic self-loather, but I also acknowledge that about myself, and I do watch these old episodes, and sometimes I'm like, I'm bored. I'm a little bored. This scene is taking too long. This scene could easily have been two lines of dialogue. I need you to move on.
Yeah. See, but it's, to me, most of the time, it's not like overwhelmingly boring. Like, I really like how much time they take to really ensconce you into some of this, into the scenery. Like,
sure, I'm definitely not saying it's not cool to watch. I
like how old stuff is, though. I like the patter, how they talk.
You're much more forgiving of the datedness than I am, and I have tried to do a rewatch. I've seen all the episodes when I was younger, and I've tried to do a rewatch as an adult, but I'm not great at getting through the original series. But it's still on the top for me because of the dynamics. There are scenes in the original series that beat probably anything in Star Trek. Just the classic nature of them. But there is a lot to slog through, in a way.
Not that much. There's only 79 episodes.
Right. Well, 79 episodes is 79 hours, however many hours that works out to be. But it's a lot of hours of content to try to...
I know.
When there are parts that aren't great, it's about 60 hours of content that you're like... All right, what happens? You could tell me this in a quick teleplay, and I'd be probably just as interested, or whatever. I'm just saying this is one of the reasons it's notched below Deep Space Nine for me. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's still number 2 on my list.
I do want to say, I think it was only like out of 79 episodes, I think Kirk only kissed like 18 women.
That's still a pretty high number.
And most of the time, it was to try to trick them.
That's almost
into getting out of something.
I don't think that's
not their clothes,
right? And I think that's well known though. Like I think that's part of the trope is that he Yeah, I know that he's known as like kind of a man whore, but like,
Yeah.
I think it's part of the trope that he's like, woman, let me use you as sex and plot device. Like that's all part of that Kirk trope.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 18 is a lot out of 79.
Well, okay.
25%. 25% of episodes he's kissing someone. It's just a lot of people to kiss over 3 years. He almost beat my 3-year record.
But I feel like it's also not Chris Pine, who can't even walk down the corridor of the Enterprise without stopping and turning around to look at, the yeomans and stuff. Like,
yeah, but I can definitely imagine a slightly younger Kirk who's not in command being a sort of, lascivious sort of just bouncing from bunk to bunk at Starfleet. I don't think that's a mischaracterization of who he
no.
Once he's older, and we're talking about 18 people he kissed while on duty, while in command. Over 3 years.
But...
Right, okay, I'm sorry. But while in command of a starship, and most of them were in the course of his duties, he kissed that many women. I think it is fair to say he might have been a bit of a charmer at a young age, and a bit of a jumper into bed.
But like the Chris Pine version of him sort of like plays him as sort of a goofy frat boy.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't see him as a charmer at all. He's just like, I'm good looking, kiss me.
Right. I do think he's played a little frattier is probably a good word for it. They were trying to capture a different audience, I guess. But I don't think that is completely inconsistent with who he could have been. And also, it's a different man. I mean, you really want to go there. It's a different man.
It is.
Lost his father. Lost his father at a young age. Had to be taken in, but he got taken in as a young boy by a frat, by a Starfleet fraternity.
A Starfleet fraternity.
He was like the young boy mascot of a Starfleet fraternity.
It's a different universe, different man, but they were doing that because they were like, oh, this is what the mainstream knows about Kirk.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Not even
that's true.
A thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not a thing. It's definitely something it is in the show. Like kissing 18
is in the show, yeah.
18 women is a lot of women for any character to kiss over a 3-year period. If you're not watching How I Met Your Mother,
I think Court Marshall McCoy mentions that he was a ladies' man in the Academy.
Oh yeah, there you go. All right. Let's go on to our third show. I feel like these are going to get shorter and shorter as we go down. Honestly, I didn't think we'd have that much to say about TOS. I was honestly thinking I'd just purely rely on you because even though I ranked it number 2, honestly, my main sources is just the original, and I like the trio so much. I like the way that show couches moral decisions as what they are. It's so bald-faced in its sort of allegory that I just kind of like the. I like that nature of it, I guess.
Yeah, and it just, I mean, even beyond the triumvirate dude, Scotty, like Chekhov, like, I don't know, man. Everybody's great.
Yeah,
like they're just American icons at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. Totally with you. All right, number 3. I'll go first on this one. My number 3 is The Next Generation.
That's what I landed on as well.
Man, we are dinging all over the place. I don't know that we'll have a difference. I'm wondering, because these last 3 were a lot more toss-ups in my head.
I will say my sense of serialized storytelling, my preference for that, almost made me put Enterprise above TNG.
Ooh, interesting. It sounds like we have the same number 4, too. My sense for serialized storytelling almost made me put. At one point, when I was thinking about all this, I almost put Enterprise above it, and I almost put Discovery above it.
See,
I love TNG, and there's so much classic in there, and there's so much to chew on, and so much I grew up on. But some of the same problems that I have with Voyager, which I've now revealed is my 6th. Revealing too early. Some of my problems that I have with Voyager, I also have with TNG, and it is the lack of serialized storytelling. And it's not that they don't do it at all. They often do it with like season openers, season closers. They have a few arcs in there where people have had things happen to them, and they are things that get referenced throughout the show. But you look at most of the characters in like season 2, and they're pretty much the same at the end of the show.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate.
Season 1, they're still figuring out who everybody is, but once they land on who everyone is, they pretty much don't change.
If you look at what actually happened, not a dream sequence episode or anything, the last episode, the two major developments are Worf and Troy are getting together. They're just blossoming as a relationship. And Picard, last scene, goes to play poker with everyone and says, I should have done this a long time ago. Yeah, you should have.
Yeah.
You should have.
That should have been... Yeah, like, it really is... we just talked about DS9 and how it is, from a plot perspective, from an overarching plot perspective, it is like they blew out one little planet that the Enterprise might visit and made it like a whole thing. They made an entire series about one planet where you've got a race of people that's overthrowing a race of people that's been enslaving them, and what are the effects of that? Yeah. That's the plot. But the characters, they dive so deep into those characters, and they change and grow so much. It is really an analysis of character. TNG flips that. There's a lot of stuff that happens, both to the Federation and to these people, that they go through a lot of things. Picard's story, he is the main character. He's the captain of this show. Picard's story is, I'm the captain of a starship, and I'm kind of a loner. I went through a lot of events in my life, but then finally in the last episode, my arc, I finally just like turned the corner on that arc. Instead of having multiple things where he grows and changes and over time develops, there's just no character development. There are character changes slightly, but not really. You really look at the final episode and episode season 2, and you can just point to where those people would be, and they're still there.
Weirdly enough, I think the characters to get the most development out of TNG are Data and Wesley.
Data is definitely a character where, because of the nature of him as a character, as an artificial life form.
Wesley, too, he just grew up.
Right. Sure. But Data, I'm just saying they actually focused on him growing as a character. Like, they really spent time focusing. I don't know that happened with Wesley. He just actually grew up, like you said. Like the actor grew up and changed.
They did. They did a lot of stuff. He went to Starfleet Academy. He didn't make it in. Then he tried again, and there was like some stuff going on with like the Traveler. When he tried to stop that. That was so weird. The last Native American colonization. They're trying to give it up to the Cardassians. It was part of some, this big treaty or something. I don't remember exactly, but he took a stand and then wound up leaving with the Traveler. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on with Wes, for real.
And I also, I'm definitely not. I haven't watched every episode in a long time, but I feel this is purely a feeling. But I feel like a lot of the problems and the moral debates on TNG are a little more cut and dry. Like, I feel like a lot of times, like Wesley is trying to stop them from taking over that final Native American thing, American colony, and you just kind of know Picard is wrong. Then, to toe the Federation line, like there's just an obvious right and wrong in a lot of those episodes, which is another one of those like sort of straw man problems. I think TNG does that more than others.
See, I felt like that was like what they were trying to get us to understand, is that Picard was wrong. But if you look at the actual, if you look at the problem he's faced with, like, this is like a big deal. Like, we're talking about like not having peace with the Cardassians because they can't,
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I think I can't really argue it. We need to actually watch the episode before I argue it because
it's been a while.
From my memory, it's just such a clear. They couch it as such a clear thing that Wesley's doing the right thing, and they could have easily made an argument. If they're going to have one of your main characters choose the other side, even if it's an antagonist, especially if it's your captain, if you're going to have him on the opposite side of one of your other main characters, you need to show me their compelling reason and not just like kind of a following orders kind of thing. Which again, it's been a long time. That's just
It's been about 6 years for me since I saw Journey's End. So
yeah, that's probably about me too. I really want to rewatch all of Star Trek, and that's part of what this cast is going to do. We're going to rewatch some stuff and go over some of our favorite and some of our least favorite episodes, and really dive into some old stuff and all the new stuff. So I'm just excited to be here, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, but TNG, and the reason it falls so low on my list, though, one of the reasons is like it is very much like. To me, it's very much Law and Order Star Trek. Like, I could just put on an episode while I'm doing anything and just have it going in the background. I love that. But that's also its biggest fault. Like there's so much stuff they never went back to. They just never went back to and picked up. Like, just dangling plot threads. Like, when Q and Guinan meet. And like they've clearly had a history, and Q tells Picard that she's not what she appears to be. She's an imp. Like, what the hell does that mean? They never went back to it. And like, Guinan did some kind of weird like hand things, and like stood weird, and like she had some sort of like innate defense against Q. They just never hit that up again. They never went back to like the aliens that had like completely taken over Starfleet, these parasites that were making heads blow up, which might be the most gruesome episode of Star Trek ever. And that's because like at the end of the episode, like they had sent off their little like their little signal to their people, and they just eventually just like made that into the Borg and never like hit up. Like those were supposed to be the big bads of TNG after the Ferengi. Like that was supposed to be a big arc of these like this invasion.
Interesting.
Never happened.
Yeah, I need to go back and see. I just need to go back and watch more TNG. I need to go back and watch all of it again, and
That's right.
We'll do more of that. But yeah, TNG. I feel like we've been a little negative about TNG, and I don't. I think that's.
No, I'm not trying to be.
I know. I think part of the reason. I think part of the reason we're being negative is because it came in third on our list, and we still love it. So we're trying to explain ourselves, but I also think we should say the things we like about it.
Well, like every Star Trek podcast I've listened to, when they talk about their favorite, everyone's like, I grew up watching TNG. It's my favorite.
Yeah, me too. That's the thing. That's one of the, again, different perspective. That's one of the reasons we're here is because we don't feel the same way everyone feels about Star Trek. I feel like a lot of people grew up on TNG, and then there's a whole slightly younger generation than me who grew up on Voyager. And I think Voyager is the worst. And like, I just think and I have quantifiable reasons I feel that way, and it's not just because I grew up on it and I liked Harry Kim and Tom Paris, which I did. I liked Harry Kim and Tom Paris a lot. I guess when I was 10, I really liked all the boys on the show because I didn't. All my favorites were always like the couple guys who were friends on the ship. Even DS9, I really loved Julian and
Miles.
Julian and Miles, but that was more later season, and that was a little more of a adult reasons for those things. I also love Kira though, and I don't know, DS9. I guess I got more complex, but it's hard. It was hard for me to connect with any of the characters on Voyager because I just didn't feel like they had much to connect with. But TNG, I do love the characters. Even though they don't change, they do explore them a good bit. And I do care about Geordi, and I care about Data, and I find some of the characters to be fairly thin and exploitative. I don't think that Counselor Troy.
The TNG characters it's more about what they like than what they are like.
Okay. Explain what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, it was like, Commander Riker likes to play the saxophone.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay, but at the beginning of the show, Troy said the thing he wanted more in the universe was to be a captain. But like over and over again, he keeps saying, "I'm not ready to be a captain. I'm going to stay on the Enterprise." Well, aside from contracts with Jonathan Frakes, why?
Yeah. Yeah. I think they could have easily made him a captain. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could have done. You could have made him a captain and given like episodes to different ships where he's his own captain. They could have spun him off. They could have done all kinds of things at different points.
Or was that just a thing they kept saying early on because they knew that they weren't sure if they had Patrick Stewart forever,
Yeah, maybe the plan was to kill off Patrick Stewart and kill off Picard and have him step in.
Well, I don't know. I've heard this a lot, but I think when he got grabbed by the Borg, that was supposed to be his out, and they had a contract negotiation going through. Like,
interesting.
Best of Both Worlds Part 2, apparently, from what I hear, I don't know if this is true.
This is rumor.
Well, it's hearsay from other podcasts.
Okay.
Mostly. Like, I haven't actually seen it written anywhere. But
we're not only a third-rate podcast, people. We're a third-hand podcast.
Welcome into the Hearsay Podcast.
Welcome into the Star Trek Hearsay Podcast.
But yeah, from what I understand, the Best of Both Worlds, the outcome of that was very much dependent on whether or not Patrick Stewart came back.
Interesting. Some of that stuff is so interesting, and I hate it because I want shows to be written by the writers, not by lawyers and contract negotiations.
Yeah.
I love, but it's crazy. Do you know the story about SNL, like season whatever, the second John Lovett season? You know about that story? It's not even a behind the scenes story. At the end of the first John Lovett season, John Lovett hits it big with his liar character, and other than that, the rest of the show is doing very poorly.
Yeah, and it's Lorne Michaels pours gasoline on the outside of the green room.
Yeah, and in universe, in the universe that is Saturday Night Live, he starts a fire. And then there's like some sort of thing that comes up that says like, we'll see who makes it out next year. And then it shows like John Lovett's getting in a car with Lorne Michaels and taking off or something like that.
He sets it on fire and then he goes, oh, you know what? I can't do this. And he goes in and grabs John Lovett and pulls him out and then closes the door back.
And they literally fired the entire cast except John Lovett's. It's crazy they wrote that into the ending of the show. That is so crazy. But it almost sounds like that sort of thing. And they like to write that stuff into the show and leave it on a cliffhanger like that is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen other shows do that where I know there's intense contract negotiations and they leave it on a cliffhanger and you're like, are they seeing about killing that character off for real? That's a stupid way to leave a cliffhanger. I heard they did that on Walking Dead as well. There's a big Walking Dead scene where at the end of a season someone dies but you're not sure who, and the big question over the seasons was who's actually dead, and apparently it was partially because of a contract negotiation that was going on. It was like, well, we could kill any one of you now, so any one of you that wants to come back, you better play ball.
I just saw a headline for Walking Dead. It was like, Walking Dead kills off longest standing non-speaking extra. And I went, really? This is a headline?
It's funny. I was watching Walking Dead last night, and it was notable because I don't think anyone died in the episode. And it was notable because almost always some extra dies or whatever. Maybe some extra did die last night. It or it was the week before. Anyway, I was just noting, like, I wonder if they're just like getting to the point where they just can't lose that many characters or whatever. I don't know. I definitely noticed they're doing less killing off main characters. Although I think they might be getting. Apparently, Rick Grimes, the main character, is leaving this season, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's a different podcast that we haven't started yet.
I don't watch the show, so I won't be.
We're gonna have to do
a
Walking Dead rewatch with Matt and Dave.
No,
come on, man. There's at least 2 good seasons.
Yeah, that's my issue. Like
2 of 10, man. 2 of 10.
This is why I don't take recommendations so early on in a show's run, where people are like, "Oh, you got to watch this. It's great," and then like 3 years later, they're like, "Oh, it's not worth it."
Yeah, but then you're never on the cutting edge of something, and it's really fun. It's really fun to be like in the conversation while things are going down. Like
I'm on the cutting edge of all the DC shows and of Star Trek.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes you got to choose your universe.
Yeah,
and we've chosen Star Trek. All right, TNG is wonderful. We do love TNG. Those are our issues. That's why it ended up at 3, but we do love it. We grew up on it too. It is what won me over to Star Trek, and therefore sci-fi. Like, even though I respect the original series a little more because it is the creator of the paradigm, it's TNG that got me into things. Like, the relationship between Geordi and Data is like the first science fiction thing I ever paid attention to, you know? Nope, that's not true. Take it back. If you want to call it science fiction, which I do. I don't know why I said if you want to call it, because it's just a little wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. But Back to the Future is probably the first science fiction thing I got into. I went to see Back to the Future 3 on like my 5th birthday. And I loved the movie so much. I had a Back to the Future birthday party, and we went to see it in theaters that day, Back to the Future 3, and there's video somewhere of me with a guitar sliding on my back while we listened to Johnny B. Good on the floor as a 5-year-old.
That's awesome.
I wish I still had that video. I'm sure my parents have lost it because they don't keep up with anything. But yeah, there was video for a long time of me like sliding around on the floor. I'm like, that's still me. That's still me.
Yeah, I remember rushing over to your house after church and playing the Back to the Future 3 video game.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't think I ever got past that first level. Jumping
like the jumping the hay barrels.
Yeah, you're like riding a horse, jumping hay bales or something. And yeah. It's way too difficult for 5-year-old, 6-year-old Matt. Okay, guys. On to number 4. Now we're gonna get into the scrape in the bottom of the barrel. Our lesser favorites. Not saying they're bad, but lesser. Number 4, and it sounds like we have the exact same list, which is not good for drama.
No.
we're not providing much drama here.
We are the Berman era of drama.
So, number 4, what you got, Dave?
Enterprise.
Same here. Ding, ding, ding. We officially have the same list. I didn't know that was going to happen. I knew we had some similarities, but I really thought some of this middle stuff would get just jumped around. But, you know, I guess great minds, as well as other types of minds, think alike. I'm not saying what we are. I'm just saying we're probably the same kind of mind. Enterprise.
A couple of centrist assholes who grew up together liking the same shit.
that's
came up with the same ranking.
It's a good tagline for the show.
I expect it to be in our show description. A couple of centrist assholes who grew up liking the same shit.
Yeah. All right. So Enterprise is a show that I think it gets a weird sort of rocky start. I enjoyed it from the beginning, but by the end, it's like a really good show.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not as iconic as the other shows, and it's a little more pandery, I think, to the lowest common denominator at times.
They were fighting though, like Les Moonves. Among his many other sins that have recently come out, apparently really tried to get like boy bands on the show to like play, like dressed up like aliens to play in like the, I guess the Enterprise Lounge.
Wow.
Yeah, like that was a thing that they were trying to get them to do.
That is called not knowing your audience.
Well, when you're pairing Enterprise with SmackDown.
Right. Yeah, they did know their audience, and that's a problem, and it does it does feel
kind of did.
The show. You think the SmackDown audience was
look when we had The Rock show up on Voyager to fight 7 of 9, that was a problem for me. That was stupid. That was absolutely stupid.
I don't know if I think that's that stupid. I don't remember the episode that well, to be honest. But I mean, The Rock's a great actor. I like The Rock. He could show
Well,
up.
he didn't have anything to do other than he came out and he had like some bumps on his head and he did his eyebrow thing.
Right. Yeah.
And then he fought seven. It was stupid.
That is definitely weird. It's definitely weird. I haven't seen the episode in so long. I can't remember how weird it would be. But Enterprise, sticking to Enterprise for a minute. It's just it came out shortly before 9/11, and I think the show changed directions pretty drastically because of 9/11. The Xindi attack on Earth is so obviously just like we've talked about with a lot of these different obvious allegories, is so obvious an allegory for for 9/11 and how they deal with it and how they bridge the gap between the cultures. It's a really well done show. It's a lot of fun. I know all this 9/11 talk doesn't make it sound fun, but I actually do think it's
they started with 9/11 allegories. It's a really fun show.
Yeah. So fun. So fun. And then they do have a few of the same problems of interference. I feel like from the camps at the studios that wanted to make it more of a palatable show to the masses instead of like just steer into being a nerd show. Like I think we haven't fully learned our lessons, but some shows these days have learned their lessons that like just steer into what makes your show your show. Like be your show. And honestly, even our podcast, we've talked a lot about like, we don't know about starting a podcast because so many people feel so strongly about certain Star Trek things.
Yeah.
And we finally landed on, you know what, we just got to be us and talk about Star Trek the way we like to talk about Star Trek and find our audience. And that's the way you find an audience these days is in anything, whether it's TV, music, podcasts. You've got to know who you are and what you're trying to make. You try to cater to everyone. You're not going to find an audience because no one cares. Your lowest common denominator stuff.
Yeah, Enterprise. I feel like it got a bad rap early on because one, they were eschewing the name Star Trek for a long time, for like 2 years.
Wow.
They just called it Enterprise.
Yeah, I think somehow I feel like even Scott Bakula, as much as I like Scott Bakula, and I think he was a great captain, I think he got made fun of a lot. The Quantum Leap guy, and I'm like, the Quantum Leap guy? Like, I love Quantum Leap.
Me too.
I love it so much.
I'm like, what the hell's wrong with Quantum Leap? Donald Belisario.
Yeah, the show's wonderful.
Magnum PI.
That show is absolutely wonderful. And so I wasn't upset. It made sense to me. It's another sci-fi show, like, but I guess Quantum Leap has sort of a weird reputation. So the Scott Bakula of it all, and I do think the whole having a Maxim model as one of your first main characters into Paul was a little, and Jolene Blalock being on there was a little. As I was very of two minds at the time.
Well,
I was like, man, I don't know about this. It feels weird to put a Maxim model as a main character on a Star Trek show. It just feels a little. It feels a little even at whatever age I was. I don't know. I was probably teens at that point, right? No, I guess I was probably 20, 21, 22.
2001 to 2005. So
okay, so yeah, I was in my early 20s.
I'll tell you a little story, guys and gals, whoever may be listening.
Gather around the campfire.
Matt and I were in college when this show was coming on, and in fact, the only way Matt was watching it for a while was I was taping, because I used to tape everything. I had VHS tapes of Star Trek all over the place.
Yes, you did.
And I was taping off Star Trek Enterprise for Matt, and I was even like designing the little covers for the VHS and bringing him volumes like he was in the freaking, like those old, what was it, the Star Trek Columbia collection or something, like where they were like sending you VHS every month. So whatever that was, I don't remember. I remember that's how I got a few episodes of TNG on tape, because you were doing that when we were teenagers. Right. So, but yeah, so that's how Matt watched probably the first season of Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah, I watched the first season and then I fell off of it. And it wasn't until it's probably 22, 23, I was getting later in college. One of my friends was like, "You got to go back and finish Enterprise." I was like, "All right," and I did.
I think it was me.
No, actually, it wasn't. It was my buddy Adam.
Oh, it wasn't?
Adam Smith. My buddy,
I
my buddy
remember
Adam. He is. I think he's actually back in Birmingham. I need to give him a call. But yeah, he was like, "No, you got to see it. You got to watch it. It's great all the way through." And I was like, "All right, I'll give it a try." And then finally, I don't like. I really was interested in the Temporal Cold War storyline in Enterprise. I thought it was going to be fun, but it got really bad reactions from fans.
It did,
and I didn't like that they just seemed to have dropped it. Like we never really found out, right? Who?
They.
Like in universe, we never found out.
In universe, we didn't find out who the mystery time guy was, future guy, everyone called him.
Yeah.
We do know from like Doug Drexler and a couple of the other well, he was a designer, but a couple of the writers have said he was going to be Romulan.
That's right.
There was a pretty heavy and cool things coming in season 5. Including a Doctor Who crossover that was being talked about with the Russell T Davies, David Tennant, I guess it would be at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would have been timey-wimey. That would have been really cool, and I wouldn't have liked it from a continuity perspective. They would have had it in sort of Pocket Universe or, crossover universe thing.
The show got a bad rap, though, like eschewing the Star Trek name, eschewing the orchestra theme for Faith of the Heart.
Yeah, that was probably a bad call. I didn't mind it, but it was probably a bad call.
Even like the music they used on the end credits sounded like contemporary Christian music.
Right.
It was awful.
Well, here's the thing about that. It feels like they were trying to update it by not going with orchestral, by going with modern pop music, but they didn't go modern enough. It felt like the Quantum Leap music. Like it didn't. And having Scott Bakula there, jumping back to like the whatever early '90s, late '80s, and having all the elements, it just felt really dated immediately. And even though the storytelling was pretty good, I think it just didn't stand on its own 2 feet. And so I think it just was sort of a failure of, I don't know, almost like the art direction was a failure. Mm-hmm. And by art direction, I mean overall aesthetic of the show as a mishmash of trying to placate people who just want to see a hot girl on the screen. That first episode where they go into the decontamination chamber and Jolene Blaylock rubs gel all over her body is so just not in the spirit of Star Trek to me.
Oh, I disagree. Like, look back at the original series. Look at all the skin they showed on that.
Sure. I guess I mean modern Star Trek. I think that the '60s Star Trek is a element of its time. The culture of the '60s was not evolved on the issue, and the women were just objects on that show in many ways. And they did a beautiful things with that in Enterprise when they reversed the idea of the Orion slave girls, and they were actually the slave traders, not the slaves. That was awesome. That was really fun and cool, and like, a different take on the sexual dynamics, but I really don't like. I don't know. It just felt exploitative in a way that, at least as an ideal, Star Trek is supposed to be trying to move beyond. And in the '60s Star Trek, I'm not saying you can't be sexy on Star Trek. I think it is absolutely okay to be sexy. I kind of would have rather it been in a sex scene than just like we're going to give a reason for her to be in a freezing cold room rubbing gel on herself. As often as possible, like every time they go to a planet, they have a female in there rubbing herself down with gel.
Well, it was her and Trip Tucker.
Yeah,
they took the most attractive people on the show and made them strip.
And the communications officer, she comes in at the end of it.
Oh yeah,
so
Hoshi.
So it's them like rubbing each other down, and I was just like, it just didn't feel. It didn't feel right to me. It felt like lowest common denominator stuff.
It felt cringy, but if I'm being honest, and I look back at TNG, Troy was in a lot of cat suits. Troy answered her door at least a few times in almost see-through materials.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying this isn't a problem across all Star Trek.
And even worse...
I just think it's bad when it's not aware of itself.
Even worse, Riker's one exposed nipple.
Yes. Yes. I'm not saying it's not an ongoing problem. It just felt like with... And I disagree with this if you like. Deep Space Nine, and even with Voyager, they had kind of moved on from that a little bit, and it wasn't so. They still had a little sexuality in the show, but it wasn't so exploitative and one-sided. Yeah. And then with Enterprise, it was a step backwards. That's all I mean.
I felt like with Voyager 7 of 9, it was a real step backwards.
See, I agree that the casting of her seems that way, and seemed that way to me.
Jeri Ryan is a good actress. I'm fine with Jeri Ryan being cast.
Okay.
What I'm not okay with is the freaking Borg cat suit. That makes no sense. Like, there's no reason for her to have to wear a cat suit every episode.
Yeah. I think there's multiple reasons for that, but I think in the character of 7 or 9, I don't think she was too over-sexualized. And I could be speaking totally out of school here, but because, again, this is my least favorite show. Voyager's my least favorite, and I haven't really revisited it since I rewatched it 10 years ago or something.
No, I would agree. I don't think she was over-sexualized in her character. She was very much the Data or the Spock of the show, but that's what it was the archetype they were going for. But
well, and I mean, there's always cat suits. Even Kira, I don't think of her as an over-sexualized character, but her suit's real, like, form-fitting and fabric-y and tight. There's always a little bit of that in the shows. And some of that's in the real world, and I don't mind it. It's just in that first episode of Enterprise, it was particularly stark to me. And also, I think that for Voyager, it started out, and I do think that was a step backwards, I agree with you, but I think that, like, Voyager at least started out trying to be a little more pure to it, and I think they brought that in to try to save them or get ratings up. We're going to have a hot Borg. Who was asking for a hot Borg at the time? That's not a thing I don't look at the Borg and go, you know what? Sexualize that. I'll be in my bunk.
Yeah. You know who's the most? You know who the most popular villains are? The Klingons. Well, okay, ones that aren't bumpy on their heads. Oh, I guess the Borg. Yeah, let's do the Borg, but a hot one.
I feel like they could have sexualized the Klingons easier than the Borg. The Borg are like covered in dead flesh. Like, it's almost like a necrophilia thing. And I know that they fixed that with 709, like when she separated from the hive, I guess she got her skin tone back? I don't really understand that.
Well, I mean, I think they tried to sexualize the Klingons a little bit. Like, I've always gotten, like, really mixed signals from the Duras sisters, because I feel like they were trying to make them really sexualized because, like, pretty much they've got, like, armor over their nipples and that's about it.
Really?
But, I mean, they just have, like, massive cleavage.
Yes.
They make their teeth so awful.
Yeah. I don't know that they were ever trying... Like, I feel like they were trying to sexualize them sort of in-universe.
Yeah.
Like, the characters were kind of supposed to think... In many cases, the characters were like, well, what's up with these ladies? But from an outside perspective, watching, I don't... At least I didn't ever think they were... I was never like, oh my goodness, I am... They never had a scene where I felt like, oh, they're being overly sexualized. They just had their breasts out, which I don't know.
Well, they seem to make passes at some of the male characters,
right? And those characters,
in sort of
I think it also
grotesque ways.
I think their sexuality was sort of played for comedy, which is a whole different issue. But their sexuality is sort of played for comedy in that, like, oh my gosh, that ugly woman is hitting on Riker. Like, it's kind of that's kind of weird. That's kind of a weird look.
They definitely played that up in Generations when I can't remember which one. It was one of the Duras sisters saw Beverly Crusher, and she was like, "Human females are so repulsive."
Yeah. Which, you know, there's a certain level of this that it's all in good fun, and then there's a certain level where you start to just, like, hurt your brand for being a thinking man sci-fi if you put over-sexualized women all over the cover, because part of being a thinking man is being a little more evolved on those issues.
Right.
And not treating a woman as just meat to be stared at or whatever.
But, you know, honestly, that's one of the things I love about the original series is the cheesecake beefcake aspect of it. Like the old pulpy aspects of old Star Trek. There's something ridiculous and appealing about that.
I would agree. And especially for its time, I think that's super fun. I even think it's sort of the fun of like a Guardians of the Galaxy today. I think it has, in many ways, a modern version of that aesthetic. The issues with the original series run a little deeper with the sexuality of the original series because you got the pulpiness and the look of it all, but also the women have no agency is a big part of the problem.
Well,
not all, but
yeah, like the original series, I feel like there were those that didn't have agency, but there were also, you know, and they were just as scantily clad, but there were plenty of women who were like, you know, at least high up nurses, or there were lawyers, you know, there were higher up people of higher rank in the original series who, like, women who, but then they would turn around and do some kind of weird shit, like, you know, Janice Lester in the last episode talking about how women can't be captains. You're like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Like,
oh gosh.
Is that because she was just insane and they just kind of, you know, Kirk was placating her by going, yeah, you're right, it's not fair? Or, I mean, I'm sure, can we headcanon it that way? Like,
I have no idea, man.
We know that there was like a female captain on Enterprise, so in the canon, one at least predates it in the prime time.
Right. So you just, there, and I just have to treat that as a mistaken canon, like. And just treat the first one as a mistake and just ignore that line, which I hate to do because I like canon.
Well, see, I think a lot of people wind up headcanoning that into saying like she couldn't do it. She couldn't actually. She wasn't good enough to become a captain, and it kind of drove her mad because that was the whole point of the episode. Is she switched bodies with Kirk. It was part of her devious plan, and then she was finally being able to be a captain.
Right.
I think at the time they were trying to say, like, you know, being diminished societally has driven this woman mad, and now she's become a villain. But looking back on it, it's just so silly.
Yeah, it is.
I think they do give room for you to headcanon it, like she wasn't good enough, and she kind of went mad.
And I should say when I'm talking about the sexuality aspects of Star Trek. It's a complicated issue because you don't want to make all of your characters. You don't want to treat them like objects. Is the rule? You treat the women like people in both the writing and the, you know, hopefully the characters that are shown in a good light are also treating the women like people, and that goes for their sexuality. Sort of, it seems to me in the older Star Trek, you kind of have a dichotomy of different types of women, and it does seem like the ones that are taken seriously, the ones that are higher up, wear more clothes, which is analogous to our society today. We think of women that way too, but even that is sort of an issue from a sort of sexism perspective, like. Mm-hmm. A woman can't have her own sexuality, can't show some skin and be an intelligent sort of, you know, I don't know.
See, I think one of the things about the old Star Trek was I think more than any other show at the very least, And all of this is anecdotal. Everything you're saying, everything I'm saying is anecdotal. We don't have any empirical data in front of us. But I think that the women were shown more agency, even in their sexuality. Like, you know, it does take a lot of crap for like the women being quote unquote sex pots. But that was part of the whole point, is that those women weren't sex pots just there to please a man. They were there and they had their own wants and desires. And,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's in the. Oftentimes, the women are treated, and this is partially apocryphal from, and it will probably annoy you, because it's partially how Kirk is perceived in culture. But there are a number of episodes where he meets a woman, uses his sexuality. His sexuality is treated as power over her, and her sexuality is treated as a weakness for him. And he woos her in a way of convincing her to go against her own people or things like that. It's just sort of weird sexual dynamics. There's all kinds of things we could get into about this, but I don't even know.
I mean, but there's also something to be said for the fact that whether there's a woman or not, Kirk generally winds up shirtless, running around.
Yes.
You know, glistening in the sun.
One of my favorite jokes about that is just the Galaxy Quest scene where Tim Allen just loses his shirt inexplicably, like on the planet. Yeah. It's so good. So good.
I'm not saying the sexism isn't there. You know, it was a ridiculous time, and I feel like a lot of it's just important to note that, you know, one of the women that Kirk kisses is also like a high-ranking lawyer. You know, and like
right.
And it wasn't in any way to get anything out of her. It was just because they had a fling when they were back in the academy or whatever.
Right. One of 18. I gotcha. I was just trying to tease you because I know it's like a personal.
It's not a personal anything.
It's a little bit. It's a little bit of a personal annoyance. Is all I was gonna say. It's a personal annoyance of yours that people perceive Kirk that way, and the way that Pine played Kirk. That's something that bothers you. I'm not saying it's wrong.
It annoys me when I hear people are like
that's
like
all
Jason
he
has
is.
a friend. Jason has a friend, and he's like, he's talking about how he likes Star Trek. He's like, oh man, it's great. It's like every episode, Kirk's like making out with another chick, and I'm like, that didn't happen.
Right.
Stop perpetuating that. That didn't happen.
You just hate it when men are known only for their sexuality. And it doesn't have like other characteristics, you know.
Yeah. I hate it when anybody is like.
I know. That's I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you and teasing Star Trek at the same time.
Yeah, it's annoying.
Teasing you by teasing Star Trek. Sorry.
Like I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's not as in certain places it's worse.
Oh, for sure. I mean, obviously, Star Trek is a trailblazer with women and with gender and with race. It was a trailblazer in many ways. It still had the same issues of the day because the people making it weren't fully woke as society is today.
Right.
But you know, that's how this culture works, and we all learn, and we all learn more how to be empathetic toward other people.
I think one of the funny things though is that like over the years they have interviewed some of the actresses who were on the original series, and they all have some sort of anecdote somewhere along the line about someone saying, "Hey, why did you let them dress you like that?" And they were like, "I don't know, thought it was sexy. I liked it."
Right.
It's just, you know, society changes.
Yeah, for sure. We play in a lot of bars. Mm-hmm. And a couple weeks ago, playing in this bar, and there was this couple and this girl kept walking up to the stage, and she was getting kind of flirty with the band. Mm-hmm. And she was kind of like, you know, pointing at me being the lead singer, and she's like kind of making eyes with the drummer and sort of just like dancing, you know, just shaking her hips, shaking her shoulders, just like sort of getting down on the dance floor, as were a lot of other people. But she was particularly being sort of like flirty with the band.
Right.
Girls do it all the time. They're not actually hitting on us. It's just a It's just a way of interacting with the music, and people and ladies like to do that at some of these bars. So these girls are doing this girl's doing this, and this guy walks up to her boyfriend, I'm assuming, and he sort of just grabs her by the neck, like from behind, and like walks her away. Like he wasn't squeezing her, he wasn't hurting her, but he definitely was sort of hurting her. like stop hitting on the band.
H-E-R-D.
Yeah, hurting. He's hurting her, and he's just being possessive of her. She didn't seem to mind in any way. Like she was kind of like, "Oh yeah, I'll come hang out with you." But just because she was participating in the sort of toxic nature of him being possessive over her doesn't make it less gross. Like it makes it kind of more gross. And so a society where the women are saying, I don't know, I thought it was sexy. Like I was just trying to be sexy. Of course you were trying to be sexy.
Right.
You were socialized to try to be sexy so that you could achieve a higher status in this culture that values your sexiness over who you are. And so there's a lot. There's just it's a complex issue.
But you say that's gross, but if they are both into that,
I still
gross
say
is it?
I still say that sort of possessive nature and jealousy is not healthy. Period. And she may even like that he's possessive of her, but I say that's toxic. And
I think it's absolutely toxic and probably unhealthy. But maybe we're both assholes for saying that. Maybe she gets off on him being domineering.
Yeah, if it's one thing to get off on something and have like a sexual proclivity or whatever. It's another thing to feel that you have the rights over another human being's agency. And
right.
and so for the girl to encourage that in any way is not good. And I think it's part of a culture that exists particularly in the South. And particularly at the kind of bar we were at.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of bar you were at.
Yeah. I don't, and these are people that hire me. I don't want to flame people that pay me to do my job as a musician. But sometimes you're out in these bars, and bars can be toxic places in general. And with certain cultures, especially here in the South, there's a sort of just possessive nature the men get over the women. And so when a woman is just enjoying entertainment, and like I could see being annoyed at, I could see being jealous or possessive as well.
Right.
But there's just something kind of, even if he'd like grabbed her arm or her hand or like guided or tried to get her attention through or came over and danced with her. There's a lot of ways to handle that sort of jealousy. Like, you know what? I'm a little jealous that she is so into the band. That in itself is probably toxic. But I'm a little jealous. I'm a little jealous, but you know what? You know what would make her want to be around me? If I went up there and was a part of the party and I'm enjoying it instead of like, you can't have fun now. Sorry, get away from the band. It was weird. It was weird and toxic.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know. Like I don't go to bars. I don't understand that culture. I have known people who do shit like that with their significant others, where they will like she'll like go and flirt with somebody, and then and that is part of their like role play.
Right. Oh, and there's a difference between like a stated part of your role play where you've kind of discussed it and it's a part of your sexuality to watch someone. It gets you going to watch them interact with other men and even see them be attractive to other men. It makes you, it lights your fire in some way. But like, it's different to be just think that they are yours and that you possess them.
I mean, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate a little bit. Yeah. I'm not possessive. I am like, I don't even like using apostrophes.
But I understand. Like, there's so many sides to this issue. It's like I was saying. It's like there are ways to talk about sexuality, and I that's why I wanted to dive into this a little bit, because when we're talking about the Paul scene, I don't want to say that any sexuality on screen is wrong. I think that just setting the camera up to have a like lustful gaze at the woman when there's no story or like internal reason for it is just a little shitty. And then of course, there's also a 10-year-old, or who I know, I was probably like 13, 14, 19. I don't know when it came out. When I first saw it, and I was like, wow, I like that scene. Whew.
Which scene you talking about? We've kind of jumped around a lot.
Oh, it was the decontamination chamber.
I mean, we were like, it was 2001.
Right.
However old we were.
I was 19.
19, 20?
18 or 19, yeah. And so it definitely, there was a part of me that really liked that scene, but now a little older, a little more, hopefully a little more evolved.
Even back then, I found it cringy.
Me too.
I was not alone. I think a lot of Star Trek fans found it cringy, just like they found the theme song cringy. They found the eschewing of the Star Trek title cringy.
Yes.
And Rick Berman saying, it's closer to now, we're a little more contemporary in the music. Yeah, emphasis on the word little, because it's like you got Phil Collins up in here, buddy. Like, you say contemporary, but you got gray hair, dude.
It was 2000, like you said, it was 2001, you said? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's 2001.
2001.
So Russell Watson doing Faith of the Heart is not exactly what we need.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't what we needed, and it was just weird. It was a weirdly put together show, but overall, it came together as a pretty good series. And so if you haven't seen it because you just never bought into all those things, I think it's definitely worth a watch.
I mean, I feel like the first two seasons are better than TNG's first two seasons, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
And 3 and 4 are fantastic serialized storytelling.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so Discovery is number 5 for both of us. It's so funny that we have the exact same list. And I don't have a whole lot to say about Discovery, and we've been on a long time, so let's give the Cliff Notes version of why these ended up at 4 and 5. Main reason I put it there, it just hasn't proven itself to me yet.
I feel like it shouldn't be, considered upper echelon for. I kind of feel like, as long as it's still running, it should be lower tier just by default.
Maybe. I just think there's enough in the first season to like, and There's enough in the first season to not like, that it's still just sort of a mixed bag for me. And it's hard for me to take out any of the other series that I love so much and kind of say right now that Discovery is topping them. I think after 2 or 3 seasons, even though if it's on the air, it could easily edge out Enterprise. I even think in many ways it's better than Enterprise. If it had a better first 2 episodes, it might have gotten above Enterprise for me. And if it two major things, it had such a bad start. I really don't like the first 2 episodes. If it had a better first 2 episodes, and if it had a better attention to canon, I would probably have Discovery above Enterprise. It would. It's going to take it a few seasons before it tops TNG for me, because TNG is such a classic.
Yeah.
And it'll really probably take its whole run, and I'll even if it's amazing, it will still be really hard to top DS9. But Enterprise, I think it could take Enterprise.
I love Discovery's pacing. I love their sense of story. I love their, even though like one of their big plot twists wasn't really a plot twist because people on the internet were too smart and figured it out.
I was lucky that I did not follow the internet stuff. I didn't follow and I kind of don't want to, even though we're starting this podcast. I don't know. I love to speculate here on the show, just us. And if our listeners have some speculation, but I don't really want to hear every theory from the internet, because they did apparently. Yeah, spoiler alert for Discovery. We give a spoiler alert because it's fairly new. When he turned out to be from the Mirror Universe, Lorca, when Lorca turned out to be from the Mirror Universe, I did not know that was a thing that was going around the internet. I just wasn't reading the internet. I wasn't following any of the podcasts.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing that was going around the internet.
And then 1 episode before the reveal, or 2 episodes before the reveal, I turned on some Star Trek podcast, and without a spoiler alert, the guy just said, well, everyone knows that Lorca's from the alternate universe, and that and said some other thing, and I was like, I didn't know that. Like, I still don't, because it's still just speculation at that point. But like, he gave me two. I forget what the other spoiler even was, but he gave me two major spoilers in like the first 2 seconds of his podcast, and I was like, dude, a spoiler alert, dude. Come on. Not everyone listens to every episode you put out or whatever.
The one I was talking about was the Ash being.
Oh yeah. No, that
what was his name? Vok.
That was the other one. That was the other one of the two. He said two facts really fast, and that was it. And I was like, what the? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to give a spoiler alert on anything that's less than a year old, at least. And try to go spoiler alert if I just think people should watch it.
Absolutely.
I get a little less spoiler alerty if I just think it's bad. Like, you don't need to worry about it. It sucks. Here it is. Here's what happened.
So yeah, I'll probably get a lot of crap. There are a lot of disco fans out there who are very adamant that we shouldn't question the validity of his canonicity, I guess.
Right.
They're like, oh, you Star Trek fans, they said it was the Prime Universe. The producers say it's the Prime Universe, therefore it is. And I'm like, no. As a fan, I retain the right to accept or reject something as a piece of the canon that I hold dear.
Interesting. I don't know that
I feel about it.
I don't know that I feel that way. I think that if it has been canonized by the producers and by Paramount, it probably is canon. Now, whether they do a good job, and whether I eventually just go, well, screw Star Trek, I really like those first few episodes. It's almost like it's like albums for me. I love Weezer's first 3 albums. Fourth one's pretty great too. But everything after that gets a little bit for me. It's still Weezer. I still have to count it as Weezer, but I don't have to say I love it.
But see,
it doesn't ruin those first 4 albums for me.
I'm not going to say that Discovery isn't Star Trek, but I am going to say that as far as I can tell, it is not in the prime timeline. And since I doubt there's going to be a producer that shows up on screen in universe and says, "Yep, this is canon."
Right.
I have the freedom to do that, and even beyond the obvious technological jumps, like they have technology that they were just getting on DS9 and acting like it was a big deal. Even beyond that, like I get that you have to recast, especially when people have passed away, but to cast people and write the characters in such a way that doesn't feel or look anything like the characters that came before, like Sarek, James Frain. I don't want to say he's doing a terrible job. He's doing a passable job. He just plays James Frain and everything, I feel like. But
I don't feel that way about him. I think he's very different than the other characters I've seen him play.
I just feel like he's like Theo Gallivan from Gotham
over
here.
He doesn't feel like that.
As Sarek, but he definitely doesn't feel anything like the character Mark Leonard played. He doesn't feel like Sarek at all to me.
Right. I haven't had that big of an issue with that yet, but I also am not as up on Sarek as you probably are.
And I feel like it's going to get worse in some ways because we've already heard the guy playing Spock, Peck. I think his name's Josh Peck, maybe. He doesn't sound anything like Nimoy, and like that voice is such such an important part of the character, the voice and the demeanor, and I don't think Zachary Quinto ever got it, and I don't think this dude who's supposed to be Leonard Nimoy Spock has it so far.
Yeah, and this is where me and you come down on different sides of things because some of that stuff doesn't bother me. just doesn't bother me. It's just the kinds of fans we are, the kinds of people we are. You can recast someone, they can be drastically different as long as the facts remain and the core of the character remains, depending on the situation. Like, the fact that Spock is different in the Kelvin timeline, I am fine with that. He's younger. He's also, it also is a different universe, butterfly effect. Maybe he's had some changes. That's all fine with me. And this one, I agree with you. It'd be nice if they at least kept the facts the same, but changing a voice doesn't really bother me. Voice, or if you made him drastically different character-wise, which I have a feeling they might do, then I agree with you, and I'm totally with you. But the stuff like the voice and the look, like they could have cast Rainn Wilson as Spock if he did a good job. I'd just picked Rainn Wilson out of a hat, but
I enjoyed Rainn Wilson as Mud, but I didn't feel like he was playing Mud.
Right. I don't remember the Mud episodes well enough to remember much about how different he was. Honestly, I need to rewatch the Mud episodes. I really liked him in the show, but I need to rewatch those episodes for sure.
Who is that guy? They should have cast him as Mud. That Tompkins guy.
Well, and this in lies why probably Discovery will probably never be reach the top of what they're doing. They wanted to make something new and different in Star Trek. And instead of trying to, if they want to create all the new art direction and all the new ships and all do whatever you want, jump ahead. Stop going backwards. Star Trek has not gone forward in so long. And
that's why I'm excited about the Picard series, and they've said that it's not going to tie into Discovery.
Okay, cool.
So I can accept Discovery as a separate universe, as I have been so far. By the way, it's Paul F. Tompkins. He looks like a young Roger Carmel.
I love Paul F. Tompkins.
He should have been Mud.
I'm absolutely on board with that casting. Paul F. Tompkins is one of my favorite comedians, period. And him in Star Trek and him doing the things that Rainn Wilson did on this would have been great. But I like Rainn Wilson. I don't have a problem with Rainn Wilson as Mud. I can completely just accept a new version of a character as long as that character. It's more about the writing than the performance for me. A performer, I like giving a performer the freedom to do something a little different.
I'm not mad. I'm not nuts. So I know we've had to deal with this in the Prime Universe, and I accept it as the Prime Universe. Obviously, Robin Curtis taking over for Kirstie Alley and playing a completely different kind of Lieutenant Saavik. Comes to mind immediately. Yeah,
I just think this series being set in the past was a mistake. They're tying it to original series in a way that it was unnecessary. I do think that maybe they wouldn't have gotten the viewership if it wasn't Kirk times, or 10 years before Kirk times, or however many years it's supposed to be now.
I don't think it would have mattered, honestly.
Yeah, maybe not. And I see why they did it, is all I guess I'm getting at. And I see why they would want to bring in Spock and the Enterprise to the show now. But you're just shooting yourself in the foot by trying to be creative and innovative and go backwards. Enterprise actually did the dance very well but they were also 100 years before, being so close to the same time. If you're going to do that, just pay attention to the rules of canon. And I agree with you. It might just have to be an alternate universe story one day. One day we might just decide, Discovery's a nice little story, but it's not in my Star Trek timeline.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that the designers are like, oh, well, we wanted to put our own spin on it. We wanted to acknowledge that, things have changed, and you've got to update it no, you don't. You don't. Enterprise proved that. You look at the Through a Mirror Darkly episodes, they brought in Doug Drexler. They sort of refitted they made a completely, from the naked eye, just glancing, that bridge looks exactly like it did in the original series.
Right.
But with HD cameras, when you get closer up, they put in a lot of little detail. It wasn't just, the standard old sets.
Right.
Like, they put in a lot of detail that made it look like, oh, well, look at that pattern on the floor that we never got to make out before. Look at these seams here, these where the bulkhead merges,
As very excited as I am to talk Star Trek with you as this next season of Discovery comes out and like speculate and be excited about where the characters are going and what's going on, I have a feeling you are going to be frustrated as hell with this Enterprise.
I'm already frustrated as hell with the Enterprise.
Oh, I know, and we've only seen the exterior.
When it showed up, I'm like, that shit does not look like. I paused it. I was like, that shit does not look like the Enterprise. Look at this.
When they show us the bridge, you're gonna be inconsolable.
I'm not gonna be inconsolable, and here's why though. Like, because I do not accept it as Prime.
All right. And if you gotta live your life that way,
is how I've had to live my life.
If you gotta live with your life with that alternative lifestyle, I can support you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like, I cannot watch this show happily and look at all of these technological leaps that they didn't even have in TNG or DS9 or Voyager.
Yeah.
And watch these actors say their name. Actually, the lady that played Amanda did a really good job, and I would be perfectly happy to accept her as pre-Journey to Babel Amanda Grayson. But this guy, James Frame playing Sarek, I just can't get over it. This guy playing Spock, I don't even know what he's doing yet, but already I'm worried. If they keep saying they're going to reconcile it with canon. Right. The producers have acknowledged that it's not reconciling with canon at this point. If they can reconcile it, God bless. Let's do that. Yeah. I'm not even talking about the god of Shaka-Ree. Little Star Trek V humor.
Sorry, I missed it. But you're doing it in the right place, so keep it up.
Yeah, I know. If I'd said that on DC on screen, Jason would have been like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, no, not that one. Shaka-Ree.
Love it. All right, well, let's get to our last and final nail in the coffin of this podcast. So Voyager is both of our least favorite live action Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's so funny we have the same list. I know that it's not that crazy that me and you who have talked about Star Trek our entire lives would have similar lists, but I still think it's funny that it's exactly the same. Because I didn't know what my list was until I sat down to do this today. And so it's funny that we came up with the same one.
I just came up with one. Like, I just wrote them down as honestly as I can. I pretty much knew what they were going to be, but I didn't think about it until like right before we did it.
It's not like we've done this on it's really funny to me. I know it's not funny to the audience, but it's funny to me.
What might be funny to the audience is, like, you asked me and I was like, oh yeah, no, I left one off, and I left Voyager off. Like, I just forgot that it was even a series.
I was like, all right, I got the 6 series down. You got the 6 series down? He's like, 6? Oh, there's a slight oversight on my list. All right, so Voyager is not a good show. I really enjoy some of the characters. It's still Star Trek. I can still sit and watch it in the background for whatever. But I think it's a bad show. There's no character growth at all. It's similar in all the ways of the worst Star Trek to me.
Yeah. They took all of the wrong lessons from The Next Generation, I feel like.
Yeah. I agree.
But even pushed home the no conflict, which is weird and a missed opportunity, honestly.
Oh, for
like a lot
sure.
of people say, I hear a lot of people say, like, well, Voyager failed because they were like, Star Trek is supposed to be like leaving home. They were trying to get back home. That is not a valid argument. I'm sorry.
Not at all.
That's ridiculous. Voyager had problems because, one, they couldn't decide what they wanted to be, whether they wanted to be a standalone show or they wanted to be a serialized show. And when they wanted to be a serialized show, it was just all Borg all the time. They really didn't focus on anyone but Janeway or Seven of Nine most of the time, or the Doctor.
Right. Everyone else was always instead of having, it feels like, and this again, I haven't watched it in 10 years, but it feels like instead of having any real standalone episodes really dive into other characters, most of it was always Janeway and Seven of Nine. Janeway mostly, and then Seven of Nine. Most of the times, other characters were side characters. Mm-hmm. They definitely had episodes that focused on Tom and B'Elanna, but it's just, I don't know. I really like an episode that almost doesn't even mention some of other characters, and you just really focus in on one character. Like you said, you knew Rom better than you knew Riker. Like, Rom is such a side character, but they have whole episodes where Rom is the main character of that episode. And you don't get that much with Voyager.
And, a big problem I have with Voyager is they always hit the reset button. Like, whenever anything happens of consequence, by the end of that episode, there will be some sort of technological bullshit that makes it all not happen, or it was all like a holodeck adventure, or it was all, an alternate history of Voyager as told by a version of the holographic Doctor who didn't get home, or a copy of his program, or whatever the hell. It's always something stupid like that.
Yep.
It's just like, oh my gosh, dude.
I agree. I completely agree. All kinds of temporal anomalies and reset buttons galore.
Year of Hell was like the best episode of Voyager ever, but
it was, and then they reset it.
Whimper.
Oh, it's awful. I can encapsulate my thoughts of Voyager pretty simply. It has some of the most potential of any Star Trek series. It starts with 2 crews, one full of terrorist revolutionaries, and one full of Starfleet officers that are chasing them. And then they have to join forces on a crew and spend what looks like 80 years to get back to their home. Mm-hmm. You have so much room. It could have been like a DS9 where you're stuck with the same group of people and you're traveling a long distance, and the 2 groups could have been butting heads the whole time and having interesting interactions where they have differences of opinion, and there could have been all kinds of Maquis uprisings. And after episode 1, I barely hear the Maquis anymore, and the ship stays exactly the same. They change technology. They get new technology in the ship throughout. It never looks different. You never have like panels falling apart. Where are they getting all this refit?
Yeah, they did it on DS9. They would have like Chief O'Brien like trying to fit Federation technology into Cardassian technology on the station all the time.
Yes, exactly. They did amazing things with DS9, and there was episodes where there'd be a battle. You come back to DS9, and they literally just had like pieces of the set falling down, and like pipes and like work stuff. Even on the first episode, he gets there, they just went through a thing, and he's like having to step over debris, and they did that throughout the series. They did things like that all the time, and it just the Voyager, the ship stays the same, the crew stays the same, no one grows.
Then you look at TNG, and like there's so often at the beginning or the end of an episode, during the captain's log, Picard mentions, "We're leaving Starbase so-and-so after having repairs from a battle with the blah, blah, blah." Or they're like, "We are en route to this Starbase to get repairs from this battle we just had that you just watched." And like, that Voyager has battles all the time.
Yep.
But they never get repairs.
Yeah, and they do a little canon with that, where they made the ship a different kind. It was an experimental ship with like, I forget what they even say. It's like neural something interfaces and some sort of ability for it to grow the organic compounds or something like that are able to.
Yeah, it was like biogel.
Biogel, it's able to heal itself or something. So that was their little bit of nod to like, hey, yeah, we got to give this ship something interesting to allow it to fix itself or something.
And this is going to be my Kirk makes out with every girl, but I feel like every other week it was either a holodeck problem or the biogel had a virus.
I don't think that's true.
It feels like those, like the holodeck episodes were definitely like a problem. Ever since the big goodbye on TNG, it was just like every time they go on a holodeck, that holodeck is going to malfunction and they're going to get stuck.
Right. Well, they're just on Voyager, it seems like they were just really scared to like actually delve into the characters and make them work. And so I just don't know, man. I just don't know. I don't think that. I just really don't like the show. That's really the bottom line. I think I really enjoyed some of the performances at times.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, as a kid, I loved Tom and Harry and B'Elanna, and I really like the Doctor. But I just can't get behind. I guess the Doctor grew, but not really. Mm-hmm. He just was on longer. Like he developed a life, and it was more like he had a situation that he had to put up with for a long time instead of like changing a lot. I don't know. There's so little change on that show. It frustrates me a lot.
Are you aware that Tom Paris was not that Robert Duncan McNeil was not supposed to play Tom Paris on Voyager?
I'm not aware.
He was a character named Nicholas Locarno on The Next Generation.
Yeah, I remember him being on Next Generation.
And he basically caused this guy, a fellow cadet's death. Yeah. All right, and then they tried to cover up the accident. He was supposed to play that character on Voyager.
Oh, that would have been really cool.
And then, if I remember correctly, they didn't want to pay the guy who created Locarno.
I hate that. That pisses me off.
So, but Tom Paris they would have done the same shit with him.
Right.
Tom Paris is exactly the same character. He just has he even has the what was it? The admiral father?
The father was an admiral or something like that. Yeah. Oh man. That's so fun and clever, and watching back that episode, he's such an asshole, like a young entitled asshole, and that's kind of who he's supposed to be when Voyager starts, and he's like the asshole with sort of the heart of gold, I guess. Oh man, just really don't like that show. Let's not dwell on Voyager. I have a feeling we won't dwell on Voyager much on this show.
I had a lot. There were a lot of things that I liked on Voyager. I loved that episode, Real Life, where the Doctor has his holographic family and then his kid gets killed or whatever that was.
I love the episode when they abandoned the super evolved lizard baby on the planet.
Yeah, that was the worst thing ever.
That was the worst episode. I'm just teasing. I just wanted to call it out for being shit again.
Yeah. You remember, though, we used to be really excited about Voyager. That was our jam.
For sure. We were very young. We were 11 or 12. And we watched Scorpion Part 1, and then we lost the channel where we lived. Kids listening to this
because it went to UPN.
Won't remember, but there was a time we had a thing called stations, and sometimes they just wouldn't show up in our neighborhoods or whatever. So we lost that channel when they moved to UPN in our area. Yeah, it's stupid. Anyway,
we did not have a UPN affiliate, and specifically, Paramount did not want to make Voyager accessible to affiliate stations because they wanted there to be a reason for people to watch UPN. Yeah. Unfortunately, more than half the country didn't have UPN.
Exactly. And they wanted a public outcry of people saying, hey, we want Star Trek back, but apparently it wasn't strong enough. And so we didn't get it for a really long time. And then when I finally went back to watch Scorpion Part 2, I was somewhat underwhelmed.
It sucked.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. I really felt and maybe Voyager was okay in the beginning, or maybe I was just a kid. I don't really remember. I rewatched it.
We both loved DS9 at the time.
So I rewatched it about 10 years ago, and I just found the whole show to be such a labor to get through because I just don't have there's nothing driving me forward in the story to say, oh, I can't wait till this evolves or this dynamic develops. It just is the same the whole show.
Yeah.
The best we get is they're making that transwarp ship, I guess, which I do enjoy that kind of stuff. I enjoy the development of new technologies on the ship. I forget what they call it, something flyer.
Oh, they had the Delta Flyer. That was just a different kind of shuttle. but which is weird because they had like a finite amount of shuttles, and like they gave us that number, and then over the course of the series they lost or destroyed way more than they ever had
Really?
on the ship. Yes.
Yeah,
And they did the same thing with crewmen, like crew members. They had
That's funny.
yeah,
So anyway,
they didn't pay attention.
Voyager's bad.
Ronald D. Moore went to work on Voyager. He was there for 2 days and quit.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that story. It's crazy. Yep. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just I hope that we've learned our lessons from the past. I don't like that. I feel like the UPN thing was repeated when they brought Discovery to CBS All Access. They just like shut out a huge portion of the population who's not going to spend money to watch a Star Trek series. And how are you roping in new people if your show isn't available?
Well, they're going to do it in a couple of different ways, and I think it is like I was on board with you at the beginning.
Well, what have they announced? I'm asking that rhetorically, but I'm also asking it if there's an answer.
Internationally, they're putting it on Netflix.
Right. What are they doing? What are they doing nationally?
Nationally, they are letting the old guard die off. And that's like everything's moving to streaming. Network television, I mean, the networks are just going to become streaming services.
Sure. Yeah, that's my question though. Is like yeah, they're letting the old guard die off, but like they should put old seasons of Discovery after a year, just like they do on the networks. They should put old seasons on Netflix or Hulu or wherever. It needs to go somewhere because you're not going to you're going to have the same number of people you started with, and they're going to dwindle over time, either by death or disinterest.
But CBS isn't putting their shows. I don't think CBS is putting any of their shows on any other streaming service. I think they're building their own service. They're going to. I mean, there is Star Trek on Netflix as per another deal, but I think they are probably doing the smartest thing. They're developing a new DC show, Secret Six, and I'm pretty sure they haven't announced it yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be CBS All Access. All of these places are just like Disney's making their own streaming service. Warner Brothers is making their own. I think that's where it's going. That's where it's all going.
I agree. I agree with you. I don't deny that at all. I don't think
it's the same as UPN, where they're like not going. You can buy CBS All Access to watch the show. With UPN, there was no outlet that they didn't have a platform.
Well, sure, but there's that distinction. But the distinction of making your audience smaller and making your content harder to access is still the problem. And
I don't think so. I think they are moving into a niche market. Like the old people who don't know or don't care enough, they weren't going to like Discovery anyway.
Well, this isn't that. No, that's not my point. Is there's no reason currently on CBS All Access. There are very few shows on CBS All Access that are specific to CBS All Access, and there are very few shows that bring in an audience member that might like Star Trek, and that's what I'm worried about. I'm not saying they're not creating their own thing and it can't be good. If they had other and this DC show, that sounds promising. That sounds like if you get a few DC fans in there, those could have some crossover. It's similar markets, and so maybe some people who love Harley Quinn will start to DC show. Maybe I'll pay for that. Then they see an episode of Star Trek. I like to hear that.
Right.
But what I'm worried about, at least in this first year, Star Trek is their flagship show, it seems like. And all of their other shows are sort of reality shows. They're not nerdy fiction shows. And I want them to put more of that on their streaming service. It's the only way they're going to attract new people. Like, what 10-year-olds like Star Trek, you know? Like, I was 7 or 8, and my parents watched it because it was on like it was a show. You know, they didn't watch it because they didn't. My parents were not the type of parents who were going to go and buy a subscription to CBS All Access because they're just watching what's on TV. And maybe it's the best of the four. Back then, there were 4 channels, and it's the best of those 4 channels, and that's just what they're watching. Like, we need some sort of avenue for new 10-year-olds to get exposed to the content.
And I think that's going to have to be through their parents. Like, I think when you look at
that's
data,
that's a dwindling proposition, though. That's,
absolutely.
That's my point. Star Trek needs to be being put in front of new eyes, and the Kelvin timeline is a misstep because you're not exposing them to Star Trek. You're exposing them to sort of a slanted version of Star Trek that you think is palatable. There are lots of kids that are 10-year-olds that are like me and like you, even younger, that are out there who are hungry for content that is like what they will like, and they're going to like Star Trek, the kind of Star Trek that Star Trek is, not just some action-oriented, it's sort of just, it's again sort of pandering to the lowest common denominator. I feel like the Kelvin timeline is, it's like, look how much action and sex this Star Trek has, instead of like, hey, how about some morality tales that pose interesting questions and make you think? Like, there are 10-year-olds who want that.
I don't think there is a way to please the fan base as it exists, the splintered fan base as it exists, and bring in mainstream audience. Like, the Kelvin timeline is proof that you can't just throw in a bunch of action and sex and like make people care. TNG was the most mainstream Star Trek ever really got. I don't think Star Trek is or should be Star Wars. I don't think there's a way to really make that. I don't think the cost of making it is going to make them want to put it out against other mainstream shows. It has a better shot on a streaming service and being served by word of mouth.
Yeah, I
think
I don't dispute that it could. CBS owns it. The fact that they're not putting it on the air is purely a money grab because they know they have enough Star Trek fans to pay them to watch it. And they're only caring about that. And they could at least run the last season on CBS on TV.
But I feel like they
could syndicate the show onto CBS affiliates.
Then people would just wait.
Exactly. Well, then why aren't you just? That's fine. They are taking advantage of the deepest fandom, like us who care deeply, and they are not investing in new fandom. So they're just constantly trying to suck money off of the ones of us who are deep enough fans to pay money, and they're not investing in growing new fans.
Well, I don't think that it would perform well enough to make it worth it. This is a niche society now. Like, everything has to be niche now.
Well, I agree. But the thing is, niche doesn't mean I like Star Trek, so I will watch Star Trek. Niche means I like this type of a show. I like thoughtful. I like interesting. I like science fiction. So serve it up in a place. Like, find another show on your network, and maybe you put it up on CBS All Access a week early. That would still get you a lot of money. There are still people like me that would pay probably $6.99 to get it a week early so I could talk about it and be right on it. Maybe a month early. You figure out the timing, but you've got to have some sort of, maybe a whole year. Maybe maybe just like they put it on Netflix a year later. Most network TV shows put something on Netflix a year later. Maybe a year later, a year behind, you run that show in syndication on CBS near another show that also has a similar vein or whatever.
They did show the first 2 episodes on CBS, but to be fair, CBS, the network CBS, they have their own branding. They have their own audience who tunes into that network, and it is not science fiction fans.
Right.
You can pull out Big Bang Theory all you want, but people don't watch that because of science fiction. They watch that because nerds say funny things.
Yeah, that show is not a show for nerds. It's a show. It's a show about nerds. It's more like nerd-sploitation than anything else.
I feel like the only place to really go where you can have where the creators can have the artistic freedom to run a little longer, run a little shorter, throw in a couple of F-bombs if they really wanted to, get as gory as they want, whatever. I feel like the people who are still left, the people who are going to care, and the only way to make Star Trek really as relevant as it needs to be for the people watching it is to really just give it to the auteurs. And you don't want that on a network. You don't want that, restrained by advertisements and, oh, well, if we air it at 8 o'clock, they can't say, doo-doo or something,
I'm totally with you on that. I don't think that airing it on TV is necessary. That was just one possible way of bringing in viewers. I don't even think that's the answer. That was just I'm trying. They need some sort of vehicle for introducing new people to it. They need to put it where young people are.
The internet, I think they've done that. Mystery Soft.
Well, they did that, but they made them. They make you pay $7 to get a taste of it. They need to put it where young people can watch it to make it ever grow, or we're going to be the same fandom that we've been for 30 years. Like, the fandom hasn't really changed or grown or modernized, and no young people are joining it. I'm not saying no. Sure, right. Parents are teaching their kids. Some kids are just nerdy kids who found Star Trek because they're that kind of kid. But the kids today could use a little Star Trek. Like, kids today could use the story of Spock and Kirk and McCoy and the balance of logic and emotion in your life and
they have that. It's on Netflix.
You mean the old show?
Like, all the old shows are on Netflix.
Sure. And I just think they should.
And young kids don't need to be watching Discovery, honestly.
Right. I mean, they could go. They could. I would not mind if they even went with the Star Wars model, which you might hate this.
I mean, they did. It was called the Kelvin Universe.
No, I'm not talking about the the model of the type of show, but the model of how they're releasing stuff. They have. You can watch A New Hope, and in all its boring glory.
Look, I'm not one to say that I hate Star Wars or that you have to hate Star Wars if you like Star Trek. You can like them both. I know. I don't care.
I'm with you. I
don't like Star Wars very much.
Me neither. I feel the same way. And that was a jab at Star Wars. I'm just joking. I don't hate Star Wars by any means. I do think the first two movies are fairly boring. And so is a lot of Star Trek from similar periods. So don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. I'm not a big hater of Star Wars. But
I like how the Star Trek movies are boring, though.
I know you do, and I do too in some ways. But my point is, the 10-year-old today that is, even if they're thoughtful, even if they're there may be a little bit, they're still grown up on the same type of media that all the other 10-year-olds have. It's quicker paced, and you can be thoughtful, and you can be wanting these type of morality tales that Star Trek provides, and not be still not want to watch a boring movie from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
So what Star Wars has done is, if you want to know the story of A New Hope, they have it in comic book form, they have it in cartoon form, they have it in they have some sort of stories, and I think they're I want to say they're cartoons that are being narrated by C-3PO. So the fact that they're being narrated by C-3PO gives you a silly character to connect with as a kid, but it also gives you a way into a way to make any canon mistakes make sense, because you're watching it through the lens of a character, not through.
Yeah.
So there's interesting, innovative things you could be doing with Star Trek to bring in new 10-year-olds. You could be making a show for 10-year-olds. You could make an Academy show that works well for that 10 to 18 demographic or whatever, like a good teenage show. That is still Star Trek-y enough that it doesn't abandon the concepts. They've talked about an Academy show for a long time, but if you make that show, you gotta make it available to more people than the same exact audience we have today. And I audience.
Agree.
I'm happy to watch Discovery. I just know that to have a sustainable universe, it has to go. There has to be bringing in new people, and some of that is going to be us going, "Hey, this show is really good. You got to watch it."
Yeah, I think they've been burned too many times. They don't quite know what they're doing, so they're handing it over to Star Trek fans who are also auteurs and want freedom. They've got to put it on a streaming service where there are no ratings, where there's no standards and practices and all that.
Right.
So I
think I like that.
They're doing it the right
that.
way. I don't know how else they could do it because, honestly, dude, 10-year-olds, they're over here watching, Jake Paul. They don't care about Star Trek. They want to see a prank on YouTube. Like, there's too much noise. Like,
see, and I think that is a simplified view of those 10-year-olds because
everything's a simplified view.
Agreed. There's always been 10-year-olds who would rather watch a prank video.
Sure.
But there were also 10-year-olds like us who wanted to watch Star Trek, and I just don't think there's a Star Trek for them anymore. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying this Discovery is wrong. I'm not even saying what they're doing with CBS Access is all wrong. They just need a plan to bring new people into the fandom.
And yeah, I'm not sure. I've thought about it a whole lot, and I don't know what that plan would be. I really don't. Like, I just don't know.
Making content and making it available. That's it. Making content that's appropriate and making it available. It doesn't really matter how they do that, but what they're doing is they're making content that's not appropriate for that age, and they're making it not available to that age. Because even if it was the same exact content and it was available on Netflix, the 10-year-olds that are like us, that are also watching like Altered Carbon and all these other Netflix stuff, and then there's other stuff right now that is feeding that desire in a 10-year-old. So it doesn't have to be Star Trek, but as a Star Trek lover, I want it to be. I want it to go forward.
I would posit that 10-year-olds who were like us have already found it on Netflix.
I don't know if that's true, but maybe.
I mean, I don't know that it's true. All of this is anecdotal, but at the same time, I'm
not saying none have. I'm just saying like a Star Trek that's updated but still appropriate and available.
Yeah,
because
I mean, I get the updated
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying they're doing wrong with doing Discovery. I'm very happy with Discovery, and I want more of it.
I mean,
I'm just saying.
I agree.
They need some sort, and I'm sure I'll say it again, but I know we got to get off here. I've really enjoyed casting today. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, man.
We are the Star Trek Universe podcast. We'll be back with you very shortly. Check out David over on the DC on Screen podcast.
Yeah, that's it. You can. I tweet at David C. Robertson.
Cool. We'll probably create a Twitter for ourselves too, but we don't have it yet.
Yeah.
And I do the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, and I also make music, and you can check out my music at MatthewCarrollmusic.com. I make rock music, and I would really love it if you guys would check it out.
I'm sorry for the abrupt ending. I have to go to work, guys.
It's all good. We needed an abrupt ending. This episode has gone really long, and we basically about 30% of it was what we meant to talk about, and the rest was just pent up, being ready to do this podcast for like years now. It's been really fun. Great to finally get all that out, guys. Check us out online. I'm sure a bumper will come in now with where you can find us because we don't have all that stuff yet. We're just starting the podcast. So, but check us out. Live long and prosper. To reach out to us, hit us up at StarTrekUcast.com, at Star Trek UCast on Twitter, Star Trek Universe Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for us there or send us a message at StarTrekUcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv. And if you want to hear more from Matthew Carroll, that's me, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or go listen to my music at MatthewCarrollmusic.com or anywhere you get music. But Kirk has one... I called him Kirk. Picard... I'll edit that. I'm going to get beat up on the internet for that one.
I think if we're going to get beat up on the internet, it's for several of the other things we've said.
That's true.